Yo, what's up guys, it's your boy Nitrostorm here. Before we get started, I would like to make some quick disclaimers. This is a C0 to C1 tier list, not a tier list for their performance in general. Alright guys, so without further ado, let's get started. So again, as I've mentioned at the start, this is a C0 to C1 improvement tier list. So these characters will be listed and tiered depending on how much they improve from C0 to C1. The reason why I'm making this tier list is because many of us have been playing this game now for a really long time, for months now. You know, we've gone through version 1 all the way to version 1.3, and a lot of characters have been released, and in total for 5-star characters we have a great number of 13. And with Hu Tao recently added on to the list, it is a good opportunity to create an updated tier list, but for something different. So the aim of this is to let you guys know if you guys are really invested into any of these characters, whether or not their C1 is worth going for. So of course there are whales who would go for their C6 anyway, which is, you know, good for them, but there are many people, many players in the player base that, you know, aren't really able, you know, that they couldn't really afford that C6 luxury. I'm one of those people, and hopefully this will help you guys in terms of maybe when they come back as a rerun, or as a way for you to think in the future for future characters when they get their C1, whether or not you would want to go for that. Now, first of all, we need to have a baseline. So why not use one of the most, I guess, balanced characters in this game, none other than Jean. So Jean is one of your standard pool characters, where she is in the standard pool. You can get her off banner by summoning on event characters and on standard. And her C1 states, which is called Spiraling Tempest. It increases the pulling speed of Gale's blade after holding for more than 1 second, and increases the damage dealt by 40%. So essentially, if you've seen Jean's gameplay, you can either tap E, which shoots out a small gust of Anemo dealing damage, and you can also hold the E to pull enemies towards you, and then you can let them go in whichever direction you prefer. Now, this is a pretty strong E, but it doesn't work on all enemies, and that's what makes it balanced. A good baseline for this tier list, so hence I am putting her in good. In Abyss, recently, she is very useful for floor 11, second half, as well as some enemies in floor 12, because of the full damage being dependent on the enemy's max HP. Alright, now moving on to your boy Diluc. So this guy has been hyped pretty much since the start of the game, and he's still holding on as a very solid pyro DPS, considering the fact that Klee came out and Hu Tao came out. Klee, you know, she is, you know, a force to be reckoned with, you know, that little nuke basically, and Hu Tao, a slightly taller nuke. Even though Diluc is taller than both of them, unfortunately it seems that he's slightly lagging behind in terms of damage according to the videos that we've seen. Now, let's take a look at his constellation. So his C1 states, very simple, Conviction. Diluc deals 15% more damage to enemies whose HP is above 50%. What can I say? There's nothing really more to explain. You just deal 15% more damage if the enemy's HP is above 50%. So in my opinion, even though when they're below 50% HP, the damage goes back to normal, 50% of the battle, essentially, he's got that 15% damage for free. So in my opinion, this would put Diluc C1 at a solid rank. Now the reason why I put this above Jean is that Jean's more for utility and it doesn't affect all enemies, whilst Diluc's passive doesn't matter what kind of enemy it is. As long as it has 50% or more HP, he will be dealing 15% more damage. Alright, now moving on to Keqing. Now, I've spoke about Keqing before on the previous video when her banner was out, her solo event, character event wish banner, and I mentioned that her constellations aren't needed, but her C1 Thundering Might states, recasting stellar restoration while a lightning stiletto is present causes Keqing to deal 50% of her attack as AoE electro damage at the start point and terminus of her blink. Alright, so this is gonna be a little crazy to explain, so I might put a drawn image of what this C1 is trying to entail. But what that means is that Keqing can either, when you press E initially, she will place a stiletto down, and if you press E again you can teleport. And what C1 does is that when you teleport, from where you were standing and where the stiletto is, there's going to be an extra attack that deals AoE electro damage, and that's it. So in my opinion, since the multiplier, the damage multiplier is 50% of her attack as AoE electro damage, even though it's an extra piece of damage, I don't think it does that much in terms of increasing her DPS. So, you know I might get some hate for this, but I believe that her C1 is okay. Alright? 50% of her attack as AoE electro damage. It might be good, but there's no multipliers. See? There's no multiplier. It's just 50% of her attack as electro damage. While it is extra damage, it only works if you teleport, meaning if you do not teleport, then it's not gonna proc. The C1's not gonna proc. That's why it's okay. Alright, moving on to Mona. So Mona, of course, she is top tier support, especially with her burst. Everything within the burst takes more damage. But of course, just a reminder, this is about their C0 to C1 and how much that improves them. Alright, so her C1, Prophecy of Submersion, states the effects of hydro-related elemental reactions are enhanced for 8 seconds after a character hits an enemy affected by an omen. Now, what that means is that electro charge damage is increased by 15%, vaporized damage is increased by 15%, so is hydro swell damage, and last but not least, the duration for which enemies are frozen is increased by 15%. So, by what they mean by being affected by omen is when you use her elemental burst. Any enemy within the area of effect of the elemental burst will be affected by omen, which basically is like a debuff, making the enemies take more damage. So as long as they're in the Q range, the burst range, that C1 will be affected right away. So as a support, she's already a support character. You can use her for DPS as well. And the C1, the damage boosts, definitely strong when it comes to Vaporize, Electro Charge, and Hydro Swell. Unfortunately, Melt isn't part of the list because obviously it's only Hydro related elemental reactions. However, overall I'd say it's a good C1. Alright, next up we have Qiqi. So, she started out in S rank actually when the game started, because at the start healers were very strong and needed at the time. Now, her C1 is Ascetics of the Frost. When the Herald of Frost hits an enemy marked by a fortune preserving talisman, Qiqi regenerates to energy. So, what that means is that the fortune preserving talisman is like a debuff. So when you hit her, when you hit with normal attacks or use the Q, the enemy will receive a marking that you will definitely see clearly. It's like a dark blue kind of engraving. And if you use the E, there's a little ghost, that little ice thing that switches around dealing cryo damage. If that hits an enemy that has that marking, Qiqi will gain 2 energy. And it doesn't have to be Qiqi outside because the E persists even if she's not in battle. So she will regen 2 energy each time. Now, what this does is that essentially you can spam her Q more often, which in turn heals your team more often. However, the Q itself doesn't actually heal you. The part where you hit the enemy affected by the fortune preserving talisman is what restores your health. So overall, I would say that it's an okay C1. Healing is pretty good, but I don't think Qiqi does need... I think, well, in terms of healing more often, it does make it so that you can heal more often, but you can apply the debuff anyway by her talent, although it only occurs once every 30 seconds. But overall, I'd say it's an okay boost, because compared to other Constellation ones, there are much better alternatives. Alright, moving on to the first event character banner in the game, the Venti later. So Venti pretty much reigns S rank, this whole time due to his support capabilities. However, I don't even need to explain. His C1 is actual garbage. Big fat hot garbo. Put it in the trash. Alright, here, look, hear me out, right? Constellation 1, Splitting Gale, fires 2 additional arrows per aim shot. If it stops there, that's not bad. He would be dealing triple damage because his charge shots shoots out 3 arrows instead of 1. But no, it didn't. But it doesn't stop there. Each arrow deals 33% of the original arrow's damage. So essentially, you're dealing 66% more damage on your charge attack. But the main arrow itself isn't buffed because it's split into 3. So, you could do some shotgun memes, but like, Venti's roll and the damage output comes from his E and his Q. His elemental skill and his elemental burst. Therefore, his C1 doesn't really do much, other than be a stepping stone for Constellation 2, which I won't get into because we're talking about C1. So unfortunately, Venti being one of the best characters, if not the best character in the game, has one of the worst Constellation ones in the entire game right now for 5-star. Moving on to the mini nuke, Klee. Now she was one of the, I guess, started out kind of underrated because there's Diluc. They were like, oh no, Diluc's better than Klee, stuff like that. But then if you look at the sales, Klee's, she's got so much mobile sales for some reason. Any case, her Constellation 1 attacks and skills have a certain chance to summon a spark that bombards enemies, dealing damage equal to 120% of Sparks and Splash's damage. So Spark and Splash is the thing that comes out when you use her elemental burst that shoots out stuff. And what the C1 does is that it just makes it so it's free damage. Basically just free damage for C1. And there's no bad thing about it. Deals damage equal to 120%, see. So if you take a look at the Q damage, the damage that deals, the C1 does a little bit more. So all in all, the more you level up the elemental burst, the more damage the C1 does. So I would say that this is a solid C1. Alright, let's move on to our boy Childe. Well, Tartaglia, aka Childe. This guy, you could say that he's like an iffy unit, you know what I mean? There's a lot of arguments saying that he's only good when he's C6, stuff like that. But you've seen his gameplay, you know how good he is. So we don't need to talk about that. His Constellation 1 decreases the cooldown of Foul Legacy Raging Tide by 20%. Now, Raging Tide is the E. So, For Childe, if you have him C6, the C1 basically becomes redundant. But when it's C1, the 20% does make a difference because the max cooldown is 45 seconds. His E has a max cooldown of nearly a minute, 45 seconds. Fortunately, 20% of that is 9 seconds. We save 9 seconds, so it goes from 45 seconds max cooldown into 36 seconds cooldown. And the max duration for the E is 30 seconds. So, you know, I'd say I would put it on I would say it's good. I would say I'll put it on good. Now the reason for that is when you do preemptive cooldowns, that 20% cooldown will reduce it by 1 second minimum. So preemptive cooldown for the fastest duration goes from 6 seconds cooldown to 5 second cooldown, meaning you can switch back to Tartaglia and do more DPS. Hence why I'll put him on good. Next up, Zhongli. So this guy, he's got one of the funniest stories to tell his grandchildren, you know what I mean? Like, oh, one day I was pretty bad, but then I got buffed, and then I got buffed again, thanks to Homer. In any case, his Constellation 1 increases the maximum number of stone steels created by Luminous Lapidus that may exist simultaneously to 2. Now, at first glance, you would say that it's okay, but in my opinion, I think it's good. I think it's good. You see, resonance damage stack with each other. So if you have two constructs next to each other, the damage will be dealt separately by each construct. So if you have one construct only, let's say, dealing 2000 damage, so every tick 2000 damage. But if you have two constructs, so in this case 2 Zhongli stone steels next to each other, they will both do 2k damage each tick. But if they both hit the enemy, then that's actually 4k damage each tick. So you could say that it essentially doubles his damage output of resonance if he's on his own. If you have Geo MC, like Geo Traveler for example, then Geo Traveler will cap you out on constructs anyway, so lessening the need for a C1. But I would put it on good. Next up, we've got your boy Albedo, aka Mini Bob Ross. So this guy, he was pretty underrated until you see all those defense builds in YouTube of him dealing 40k damage by doing nothing. Keep in mind, he press E, he switches out, free damage. Anyways, his C1, transient blossoms generated by Albedo's abiogenesis solar isotoma, regenerate 1.2 energy for Albedo. Now, you see what this one's actually a pretty big C1, but I don't think it makes him busted, you see. Not yet, not yet. Because what it essentially does is that you regen energy back by the mini things, the mini explosions. You get energy back from that, which is, I'd say, is pretty solid. You get to spam your Q, but since you normally your Albedo is defense build, the damage of his Q isn't gonna be that big. But I would definitely say that it is a solid C1. If you build him offensively, that C1 is definitely going to do wonders for you, spamming Qs left and right. Alright, now up next, we are now for the 3 most recent characters. Funnily enough, they're all from Liyue. So, Ganyu. Ganyu is definitely a special case. The first, well, not really first. Well, first archer. No, that's Tartaglia. Any case, she is the first purely ranged. No, there's Klee. Okay, you know what? Never mind. Never mind what I'm trying to say. Anyway, she is a cryo ranged damage dealer. which you can use for support because of the long-lasting burst. Let's take a look at her constellation. So, Dew Drinker. Taking damage from a charge level 2 Frostflake Arrow Bloom decreases opponent's cryo resistance by 15% for 6 seconds. If that was the C1, that's already insane, okay? A self-applying res debuff, cryo res debuff, minus 15%, that's free damage and it's huge. Alright, and you know what's funny? The reason why that she is put into busted tier is that there's a second part to that C1. A hit regenerates 2 energy for Ganyu. This effect can only occur once per charge level 2 Frostflake Arrow, regardless if the Frostflake Arrow itself or the bloom hits a target. What is that? 2 energy for shooting a level 2 shot? And both of them don't even need to hit, just one of them? So essentially, she becomes an ulti, a burst spamming DPS that's able to inflict cryo res debuffs, as well as buffing her own cryo damage thanks to her talent anyway. So as you can see, the DPS output, in my opinion, rises up immensely with this C1. So if you guys got Ganyu at C0 and you are considering of getting her constellations, I'd say C1 is a pretty safe bet. Because busted tier, I'm pretty sure you guys can agree with that. Next up, Xiao. So Xiao, one of the more hyped characters as well, very recently, you know, with his plunging attacks, unique gameplay, pretty fun. His Constellation 1 increases Lemniscatic Wind Cycling's charges by 1. So at first you may think, oh, it's pretty trash, you know, you just get 1 charge and that's about it. Now, the reason why I would put this in good tier, actually, should I put it on good or solid? You know, let me explain it first. So he's got a talent passive, right, where every time you use Lemniscatic Wind Cycling, it increases the damage of the subsequent uses of that same skill by 15% with a maximum of 3 stacks. And then gaining a new stack refreshes the effect's duration. So this effect lasts 7 seconds. And if I remember correctly, the cooldown of his E is not that long. So you're able to refresh the E constantly. So yeah, I would agree by putting him on good. Reason being is that the only thing that the C1 does is that it brings you to that max stack much sooner, and then that's about it. And then you get more energy at the start. Of course, that would be pretty useful, I guess, maybe in certain cases, but for most scenarios, that extra E isn't something that you need to get. Last but not least, the latest character to be added into Genshin Impact is Hu Tao. Now, as you may have seen from the videos, you know, 1 million damage here, 1 million damage there, you know, 1 million damage everywhere. Now keep in mind, those are most likely probably high constellations with Staff of Homer, has to be with Staff of Homer. In any case, her constellation, I would put her in busted tier, obviously. I mean, come on guys. Crimson Bouquet. While in a parameter bouquet state activated by Guide to Afterlife, Hu Tao's charge attacks do not consume stamina. Hello? Does not consume stamina? Do you know what that means? So you use her E, she gains her big damage mode, and then most of her damage comes from her charge attacks, you know. And the fact that you can spam, it opens so much, not really utility, but it makes her so much more convenient to use. You can do big damage by doing the, you could do Keqing's combo, where you do one combo straight to charge attack over and over, and it's not going to consume stamina. And that gives you the freedom to use your stamina to dodge attacks, making Hu Tao insanely more agile compared to C0, definitely less awkward to use, and then your damage output just increases for free. And that's why I put her on busted tier. Welp, there you have it guys, this is the final tier list for the current version of Genshin Impact. We can go for a quick review. In actual garbage tier, we have Venti C1, which allows you to shoot 2 more arrows on each side. And then with OK C1s, we've got Keqing, which does a little bit more damage when you blink, but it doesn't affect when you use a charge attack to activate that. And then we have Qiqi, which does regenerate more energy when you hit an enemy with the debuff using the E, which is alright, but I would say it's a little bit awkward to use. And then now we have good tier with Xiao with the extra E, Zhongli with the extra pillar, Tartaglia with a 20% cooldown, which is not that needed, it's just a 1 second difference. And then for Mona, she does more damage in general. For everyone as a support, increased vaporize damage. So the reason why she's not in solid is that the C1 is a bit too specific, which kind of holds it back, but it's still a good constellation 1. And then Jean, for her C1, can pull enemies faster after 1 second of holding the E, which is very useful in certain situations, such as in certain floors in Abyss. For solid rank, we have Diluc with 15% free damage if the enemy's HP is over 50%. We've got Klee, who does free damage from her attacks, dealing damage, basically a little bit more damage than the damage the elemental burst does for free. Well, the shooting of the summon, 120% of that. And then Albedo, which turns him into an even more burst spam character. And then last but not least, the 2 busted characters. I'd say the 2 most busted Constellation 1 upgrades. Ganyu with her free energy and minus 15% cryo reduction, and Hu Tao's infinite charged attacks. And that's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It might have been a little long. I did talk about each of their Constellation 1s. Hopefully this gives you guys an idea of the characters that you might want to pull C1 on down the line in the future. And with the way that I've spoken about each of the Constellation 1s, maybe it'll help you be able to think for yourself. Or not like as in able to, yeah, just think about if you want this C1 or more. So this is, you could say, a budget tier list essentially, you know, people that are unable to see 6 characters. This is just a showcase of which characters have the most benefit of getting Constellation 1. It's been your boy Nitrostorm. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this helped you. I'll see you guys in the next stream or video.